They say the strongest alphas never bleed. They lie. I have bled on the floor of my own great hall, and not one of my warriors lifted a hand to help me. My name is Isabella Voss. I am the alpha of Ironmore Pack, and the night my life changed forever began with a tournament I never wanted to hold, and a stranger whose eyes made me forget every reason I had to be afraid. The great hall of Ironmore was never silent. Even at midnight, the timbers groaned with old memory hunts celebrated, oaths sworn, betrayals buried. Tonight, it smelled like burnt candle wax and fear. Isabella stood at the head of the long obsidian table. Her council of 12 ranged before her like wolves, awaiting a command they already dreaded. Elder Marin, 70 years old and built like a war horse, sat nearest, silver hair pulled tight, one eye milky from an old battle scar, watching Isabella with the careful expression of someone waiting for a fire to either go out or consume everything. Say it plainly, Isabella said. Her voice was flat, controlled. Elder Marin set both wide palms on the table. Vincent Crane has formally demanded your submission. He claims Ironmore's eastern territory by ancestral right. He has 200 warriors. I know how many warriors he has. He has also made it known. Marin paused, and Isabella saw the old woman's jaw tighten that he will accept a bloodless resolution if you accept him as your mate. The hall went so quiet Isabella could hear the torches breathe. She had expected this. She had not expected the wave of cold fury that moved through her like a tide, so complete, so total, that she felt almost calm inside it. He wants my pack, Isabella said. He wants my land, and he believes the fastest road to both is through me. No one disagreed. She turned to the tall arched window. The moon was full and ruthless outside, flooding the stone floor with pale silver. Vincent Crane, 42 years old, barrel-chested, with a track record of absorbing smaller packs through political marriages and then running them into ruin. He had buried 2 mates already. The first had fallen from a cliff during a hunt and accident. Everyone said, though no one believed it. The second had simply stopped eating. Isabella was not going to be the third. Then we will not give him the road he wants, she said quietly. We will make him earn it. She sent the council away before the arguing could start. Marin stayed. Marin always stayed. You have a plan, the old woman said, not a question. A tournament, Isabella moved to the fire, watching the flames rather than the elder. Open invitation, every warrior, rogue, or ranked fighter within 300 miles. The winner becomes my bonded champion. Vincent cannot legally challenge a pack that has formally closed its alpha succession. Silence. It buys us time, Isabella continued. Whoever wins the tournament becomes my chosen warrior mate by old pack law. Vincent's political grounds dissolve. And if a capable warrior actually wins? Marin asked carefully. You would be bound. Isabella finally looked at her. I've been bound to this pack since I was 19 years old. One more chain won't break me. But even as she said it, something in her chest made a sound like a question. 3 days after the decree went out, they began arriving. By sunrise on the 4th day, the tournament grounds outside Ironmore's western gate had become something between a military camp and a festival. 160 warriors from 19 different packs and territories, their banners and colors a chaotic patchwork against the pale morning sky. Isabella stood on the high observation platform above the main arena, watching them file through the registration gates. Her beta, a quiet, watchful man named Callum with a shaved head and a jaw like carved wood, stood at her right. Count, she said. 163 registered. He paused. 41 rogues. She raised an eyebrow. That many? Word travels. His voice had an edge she recognized. Careful warning. Vincent Crane has also registered. Isabella's gaze swept the field until she found him. Hard to miss. Vincent stood near the east tent, a full head taller than most of the men around him, broad as a bull, with close-cropped, dark hair going silver at the temples, and a face built for intimidation. Heavy brow, deep-set dark eyes, a jaw that had never once softened. He wore the deep crimson and black of Crane Pack, and he was laughing at something one of his lieutenants said, but his eyes were already moving toward the observation platform. Toward her, she held his gaze. Didn't blink, didn't move. He smiled slowly, like a man who had already decided how a story ended. She looked away first, not in submission, but because there was a disturbance at the registration gate, and something about it pulled at the edge of her awareness. The way a sharp sound cuts through noise. The disturbance was small. A registration official, a young pack member named Petra, was blocking a man from signing the roster. Isabella moved toward the gate ramp without entirely deciding to. Callum followed. The man at the gate was unmistakably a rogue. He wore no pack colors. His clothes were plain dark trousers, a worn gray shirt, a field jacket that had seen real use. He was tall, lean, muscled in the particular way of someone who had spent years moving rather than training, real physical history written in his body rather than a gym. His hair was dark brown, disheveled, a little too long, and his face was, she filed this away, with the cool precision of an alpha reading, a threat sharp-boned and unexpectedly still. Most fighters entering an arena carried visible energy, restlessness. He carried nothing. He was watching Petra with calm, dark eyes and waiting. Beside him, holding his hand and pressed slightly against his leg, was a child. A girl, maybe 6 years old. She had her father's dark hair, worn into uneven braids someone had clearly tried their best with. She wore a pale yellow dress and small brown boots, and she was staring at Petra with wide, solemn dark eyes, holding a worn cloth rabbit to her chest. I told you, Petra was saying, her voice politely immovable. Rogues are accepted, but children cannot be on the tournament grounds during combat rounds. It's a safety rule. I understand the rule, the man said. His voice was low, even, without aggression. I'm asking if there's somewhere safe she can stay during the rounds. That's not I'll handle it. Both of them looked up. Isabella had reached the gate. Petra straightened immediately. Alpha Voss, find her a place in the guest quarters. Isabella looked at the child. The girl looked back at her, not fearful, just watchful. There was something old in those eyes for a 6-year-old. Is that acceptable? She asked the man. He looked at her then, directly, not the way men usually looked at her. Calculating rank, measuring threat, performing deference or its opposite. He just looked like he was filing her away too. Yes, he said. Thank you. Name? Ethan Cruz. He caught himself. A slight pause. Ethan, just Ethan. She noted the slip, held it quietly. And hers? Lily. The little girl looked up at the sound of her name and, to everyone's surprise, reached out and tugged the edge of Isabella's coat. Your hair is pretty, Lily said seriously. Something moved in Isabella's chest, small and warm and unexpected. So are yours, she said, and walked away before her face could do anything she'd regret. The tournament ran in 3 rounds across 2 days. Day 1. Elimination bouts, pure combat, no weapons, pack law rules. Yield or be yielded to. A single touch to the throat counted as a kill point. The crowd loved it. Blood ran freely enough that the arena crew spent the midday break raking the dirt. Isabella watched from her platform, marking fighters with the detached efficiency of someone assembling a tool. She needed a warrior formidable enough to make Vincent hesitate. That was all. The bond would be formal, political. She'd been clear in her own mind about that from the beginning. Vincent fought in the 3rd bout of the morning session. He was everything she already knew him to be: brutal, efficient, patient until the moment he wasn't. He fought a ranked warrior from the Northern Highlands, a man who outweighed him by 30 pounds, and dismantled him in for exchanges. There was no pleasure in the way he fought, only utility. He walked off the field without checking if his opponent was breathing. He caught her eye as he walked back to the east tent, smiled again. That slow, certain smile. She wrote his name in the potential winner column and felt nothing but cold strategy. Ethan fought in the 7th bout. She almost missed it. She was consulting with Callum over water rights. documentation when the crowd noise shifted, not louder, quieter, that particular quality of collective silence when something unexpected happens and everyone holds their breath at the same time. She looked up. His opponent was Brant Heller, a ranked pack warrior from the Southern River Pack, broad-shouldered and fast with a reputation for ending fights in under 30 seconds. He had won his first bouts in the exact way his reputation promised. Ethan was standing in the center of the ring, hands at his sides watching Brant come. Brant came hard and fast, a shoulder rush that should have taken Ethan off his feet. He wasn't there. He'd moved so smoothly, so exactly, that Isabella blinked and had to reconstruct what she'd seen. A sidestep. A small redirection of force, Brant's momentum carrying him 3 extra steps before he could plant and turn. Then Ethan's fingers touched the side of Brant's throat. Yield point. For seconds, the crowd didn't cheer. They just exhaled. Isabella set down her water rights documentation. During the midday break, Isabella found an excuse to pass the guest quarters corridor. She told herself it was a patrol decision. Lily was sitting cross-legged on a bench in the inner courtyard, the worn cloth rabbit in her lap, watching a pack healer's apprentice, a teenage girl named Sora, wrap a practice bandage around her own wrist. Lily had apparently been giving instructions. Tighter, Lily was saying seriously. Papa says if it's not snug it doesn't hold. Sora dutifully tightened the bandage. Does your papa teach you about first aid a lot? He teaches me everything, Lily said. Then, after a pause, he doesn't sleep very much. He stays awake and watches the door. Something in Isabella's chest moved quietly at that. She stepped back before Lily saw her. Old habit alphas were not supposed to be caught lingering over small moments. It was not the image, but she stood in the shadow of the corridor archway for 3 extra seconds, watching the child solemnly instruct the teenager about bandage technique. And she thought about a man who traveled alone with his daughter and stayed awake watching doors. What are you running from, Ethan? By day 2, the field had narrowed to 16. Vincent had won every bout cleanly. He sat in his allocated warrior tent between rounds, like a king waiting for coronation, his lieutenants grouped around him, his eyes tracking the platform. Ethan had won every bout the same way, not brutally, not showily, but with a quality that was starting to make Isabella genuinely uneasy. It wasn't just that he was fast or precise. It was that he appeared to make no decisions under pressure. Every other fighter under adrenaline showed some version of emotional combat, anger, desperation, the particular brightness of a man who likes to fight. Ethan showed nothing. He fought the way water moves around an obstacle, like the violence wasn't touching anything inside him. She mentioned it to Callum during the semi-final pairings. What do you make of him? Callum was quiet for a long moment, the length of quiet that meant he'd already been thinking about it. Formally trained, he said. Not pack school trained. Something older. Older how? The movement patterns. The way he reads spacing before a fight starts, not during. Callum paused. I've only seen that in one kind of fighter. Isabella looked at him. Lycans, Callum said quietly. The word dropped between them like a stone into still water. Lycan, not just werewolf, the original bloodline. Older and rarer, a species of shifter so far above the standard pack hierarchy that most modern packs hadn't encountered. 1 in 2 or 3 generations. Stronger in every measure, faster, nearly impossible to wound by conventional means, and possessed of a particular controlled ferocity that made them the most dangerous individual fighters in the known shifter world. If Callum was right, she hadn't organized a tournament to find a strong warrior. She had accidentally invited a force of nature. If he's Lycan, she said slowly, why is he rogue? Why is he here? Callum said nothing, because there was no safe answer. The semi-final paired Ethan against Gregor of the Highland Ranges, a veteran of 36 tournament bouts. 6'4", red-bearded, with hands that could palm a man's entire skull. The crowd wanted blood. Gregor gave them pageantry first, circling wide, letting the anticipation build, working the grandstands with a fighter's showmanship. Ethan stood in the center and waited. Gregor came with everything he had, a combination of strikes that had ended 12 previous opponents in varying degrees of ruin. The crowd roared. Ethan took 2 of the blows, just took them, didn't move. The crowd went absolutely silent. Gregor pulled back, recalibrating because those blows should have dropped any normal fighter. His eyes shifted from tactical to something adjacent to fear. He came again, this time going for a grapple. Massive arms wrapping for a lock that had broken spines in lesser fights. Ethan let the arms close, then he moved. No one in the grandstand could adequately describe it afterward. It was simply that the lock was there, and then Ethan was behind Gregor, and Gregor was face down in the arena, dirt with Ethan's knee in the center of his back and one hand resting with absolute gentleness against the side of Gregor's neck. Gregor went still, not because he was beaten, because something in the back of his brain, older than thought, recognized what was holding him down and screamed at him not to move. "Yield," Ethan said quietly. "Yield," Gregor said immediately. The grandstands erupted. Up on the platform, Isabella watched without expression. Inside her chest, something that had been tightly held for 3 years shifted slightly, like a door on a hinge, moved by wind. The night before the final, Isabella couldn't sleep. She walked the eastern wall of the compound in the dark, which was not unusual insomnia, was an old companion, but tonight her mind wouldn't settle into its usual administrative ruts. It kept drifting to a man in a gray shirt who fought like he'd stopped being afraid of anything years ago, to the little girl who gave bandage instructions and reported that her father watched the doors. She found him at the south end of the wall. She didn't expect that. He was sitting on a low stone parapet, looking at the tree line. Lily asleep against his side with her rabbit. He draped his field jacket over the child. He himself was in just the gray shirt in the night air, and the temperature had dropped sharply, and he looked completely comfortable. She should have retreated, and Alpha did not wander alone into conversational proximity with an unknown fighter the night before they competed for her hand. She sat down on the parapet 3 feet from him. He glanced at her, said nothing. She looked at the trees. "She doesn't sleep inside?" Isabella asked quietly. "She does. She woke up from a dream and wanted air." He looked down at the child with an expression that rearranged something in Isabella's understanding of him, entirely not the calm, contained face he wore in the arena, but something open and aching and fiercely protective all at once. "She gets them sometimes, the bad ones." "How long have you been alone with her?" 3 years. Her mother? Gone. Isabella heard everything in the word that he hadn't said. Gone the way the sky was gone at midnight, totally, without negotiation, with no road back. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. He looked at her then, that direct, filing away look from the gate, but different now, less measured, more unguarded. "Why are you in the tournament?" he asked. She smiled without humor. "My pack needs a champion, and you couldn't choose one yourself." It had to be witnessed, formal. She paused. "There is a man who wants my pack. He believes the easiest path through me is a claim of mate right. Old law requires I either have a bonded mate already or undergo formal selection before his claim can be legally contested." She looked at the trees. "So I held a tournament." He was quiet. "Why are you here?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. The kind of not answering that meant he was deciding what truth to give. "Lily needs stability," he said finally. "She needs walls, a home. She's been moving with me for 2 years and she deserves better." He hadn't said anything about himself. She noticed. Lily stirred in his arms, made a small sound, and he adjusted the jacket over her shoulder without looking down, purely by feel, purely by habit. And Isabella thought, there is the whole man, right there, in that single gesture. She stood before she did something irresponsible. "The final is at noon," she said. "I know." She walked back toward the main hall. She made it 11 steps before she stopped and said, without turning around. For what it's worth, I think you'd make a better champion than he would. She didn't wait to hear if he replied. She didn't trust what her face might do if she turned around. Before the final, Vincent came to her, not to the platform, to her war room, which meant he'd bribed or pressured a gate guard, and she filed that away to deal with later. He filled the doorway. That was simply what he did. He was built to fill doorways. Crimson and black, silver at his temples, eyes that had learned to mimic warmth without achieving it. Isabella, he even said her name like ownership. Vincent, she didn't rise. You're in my war room without invitation. I'll be in your entire compound without invitation if the tournament goes as planned. He crossed to the chair across from her desk and sat, without being asked. I want to talk about the rogue. Ethan is a registered competitor under full tournament law. His presence is not natural. Vincent leaned forward, elbows on knees, dropping the performance of warmth. I've fought for 30 years, Isabella. I've never been on the same field as something like that. He is not an ordinary rogue. He's not even an ordinary wolf. His eyes sharpened. You know what he is? She said nothing. A Lycan, Vincent said quietly, which begs the question of why a Lycan, presumably one with resources, and standing far beyond anything a rogue should have, is traveling alone with a child and entering a small territory tournament for a mate bond. He let that sit. He's running from something, Vincent said, or someone, and whatever he's running from, it followed him here, and when it arrives, it won't just be his problem. He leaned back, the performance of warmth returning. Marry me, Isabella, today, before the final. I'll drop my claim against Ironmore. Your people will be safe, and whatever is chasing that man will be someone else's inheritance. Isabella looked at him for a long moment. Get out of my war room, Vincent. He smiled the cold, certain smile. The offer expires at noon. He left. She sat very still for exactly 30 seconds. Then she sent a message to Callum. Double the gate guard. No one enters or leaves the compound without my clearance. And a second message to Sora in the guest quarters. Make sure the child is somewhere safe today, all day. Before the final, Vincent came to her, not to the platform, to her war room, which meant he'd bribed or pressured a gate guard, and she filed that away to deal with later. He filled the doorway. That was simply what he did. He was built to fill doorways. Crimson and black, silver at his temples, eyes that had learned to mimic warmth without achieving it. Isabella, he even said her name like ownership. Vincent, she didn't rise. You're in my war room without invitation. I'll be in your entire compound without invitation if the tournament goes as planned. He crossed to the chair across from her desk and sat, without being asked. I want to talk about the rogue. Ethan is a registered competitor under full tournament law. His presence is not natural. Vincent leaned forward, elbows on knees, dropping the performance of warmth. I've fought for 30 years, Isabella. I've never been on the same field as something like that. He is not an ordinary rogue. He's not even an ordinary wolf. His eyes sharpened. You know what he is? She said nothing. A Lycan, Vincent said quietly, which begs the question of why a Lycan, presumably one with resources and standing far beyond anything a rogue should have, is traveling alone with a child and entering a small territory tournament for a mate bond. He let that sit. He's running from something, Vincent said, or someone, and whatever he's running from, it followed him here, and when it arrives, it won't just be his problem. He leaned back, the performance of warmth returning. Marry me, Isabella, today, before the final. I'll drop my claim against Ironmore. Your people will be safe, and whatever is chasing that man will be someone else's inheritance. Isabella looked at him for a long moment. Get out of my war room, Vincent. He smiled the cold, certain smile. The offer expires at noon. He left. She sat very still for exactly 30 seconds. Then she sent a message to Callum. Double the gate guard. No one enters or leaves the compound without my clearance. And a second message to Sora in the guest quarters. Make sure the child is somewhere safe today. All day. The grandstands were full beyond capacity by noon. Word had reached every camp. The final was Crane versus the unknown rogue. Vincent Crane, powerful, feared, favorite of the oddsmakers. Ethan, nameless, packless, impossible. Isabella stood on the platform in her formal Alpha attire for the first time in the tournament. A structured dark coat with silver wolf crest stitching at the lapels, dark trousers, silver buckled boots. Her auburn hair was worn loose today. She hadn't entirely made a conscious decision about that. Lily was in the secured gallery with Sora, tucked behind two of Isabella's most trusted guards with instructions to not let her see the central arena. The fighters entered from opposite gates. Vincent came in the full regalia of Crane pack crimson and black, flanked by his lieutenants as far as the gate, crowd parting as though the air around him had weight. He was built for this. He had been built for this his whole life. Ethan came in alone. Gray shirt, dark trousers, that field jacket discarded somewhere, no ceremony, no color, nothing to announce him. He walked to the center of the ring and stood with his hands at his sides and his face as still as a winter lake. The crowd made noise, then less noise, then a strange, gathered quiet. Isabella gripped the railing of the platform. She was an alpha. She had no stake in the outcome of this fight, beyond political strategy. She had told herself that 11 times since dawn. She gripped the railing harder. Vincent moved first. He was disciplined about that. Let nothing build. Don't let a different kind of energy establish itself in the space. He came with the practiced certainty of a man who had ended 100 fights. Ethan moved. That was all anyone could say with certainty. Ethan moved, and Vincent's first combination went through empty air. And Ethan was behind him, and then beside him, and then in a sequence so fluid, it looked like something out of very old myth rather than modern combat. Vincent was controlled, both arms locked at angles that left him technically immobilized by a man who outweighed him by 60 pounds and yet was somehow managing it with one hand while the other rested at his side. Vincent strained, the muscles standing out across his neck and shoulders like cables pulled to breaking. He was Crane Pack's best fighter, one of the strongest wolves in 3 territories. He pushed with everything he had. Ethan held him with what appeared to be mild effort. The grandstands were silent enough that Isabella could hear the creak of timber settling. Yield, Ethan said, quiet, the same voice as he'd used in the semi-finals. Vincent snarled. There was a shift, not quite a shift in the way pack wolves shifted, but the air around him darkened, his size seeming to expand. Pure dominance aura flooding the arena, the tool of alphas, used to break lesser wolves to submission through sheer projected force. Ethan turned his head and looked at Vincent. He didn't flinch. He didn't push back with his own aura. He simply looked at Vincent the way you look at something small and loud from a very great height. And Vincent, who had used dominance aura to break ranked warriors, who had used it on alphas twice his age, went quiet. His aura folded like paper. Yield, Ethan said again. Yield, Vincent said, through his teeth, the word pulling out of him like something extracted against its will. Isabella let out a breath she had been holding for 45 seconds. The formal declaration took 20 minutes. Documentation, witness signatures, Elder Marin intoning the old pack law phrases with the gravity of someone who had been waiting 40 years to use them. By pack law, Ethan had won. By pack law, he was Isabella's formally recognized warrior mate and champion. Vincent's claim against Ironmore territory was legally void. Vincent left the arena without speaking. His lieutenants followed. Isabella watched him go and knew with absolute certainty that this was not over. But the immediate threat was neutralized, and the crowd was filling with the particular energy of a pack that had just watched their alpha secured and their territory protected. And she needed to perform certainty even if the thing behind her sternum was doing something she didn't have administrative language for. The formal bond declaration was brief. Ethan stood beside her on the platform for the announcement, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the afternoon air. and he looked at the crowd with that same measured calm, and she thought, this man has no idea what he just walked into. You don't have to stay, she said quietly, while the crowd noise covered them. The legal protection is established. You can. I said I'd win, he said. I don't go back on things I say. She looked at him. I need to tell you something, he said, still quiet, his eyes still on the crowd. About what I am. I know what you are. He looked at her then. Something in his face shifted, the smallest fracture in the controlled surface. Surprise, maybe, or relief, or the complicated territory between them. Then you know it comes with complications. Ethan, she looked back at the crowd. My entire life is complications. One more won't break me. And then, because she was an alpha and alphas did not show weakness in public, she straightened her spine and raised one hand to her pack. But she was aware acutely, specifically, inconveniently aware, of every inch of the distance between where she stood and where he stood. 3 feet, charged, as it had been last night on the wall. Lily had not been allowed to see the fight. She accepted this with the solemnity of someone who had been told many hard truths and had learned to hold them quietly. Sora brought her to the platform afterward, and she threaded through the crowd with her rabbit, located her father by some internal compass, and pressed herself against his leg. He put a hand on her head without breaking his conversation with Callum. Then Lily looked up at Isabella. Did Papa win? She asked. Yes, Isabella said. He won. Lily considered this for a moment. Are you going to be his maid now? Lily, Ethan said, a note of warning. That's how tournaments work, Lily said, with the logical certainty of a child who had apparently been doing research. I asked Sora. Isabella crouched down to Lily's level, green eyes to those dark, solemn little eyes. We're going to get to know each other better first, Isabella said carefully. Lily looked at her for a long, assessing moment, the kind of look only small children and very old people gave, without the social editing that most people applied. Okay, Lily said. Then, you can touch the rabbit if you want. She likes you. She held out the worn cloth rabbit. Isabella took it gently. The rabbit was clearly ancient, its stitched eyes slightly lopsided, one ear longer than the other. It had been loved to softness. When she looked up, Ethan was watching her with an expression so unguarded it was almost painful to see. Something raw in it, something that had been held carefully for a very long time. Slowly considering the possibility of being set down, she handed the rabbit back to Lily. She's lovely, Isabella said. Her name is also Lily, Lily informed her. I named her after myself. After Lily was settled for the night, Ethan came to Isabella's war room, not uninvited this time. She had left word. She had wine on the desk. She didn't usually drink alone. She didn't examine that too closely. He sat in the chair across from her, the same chair Vincent had occupied this morning, which struck her as so completely different an occupation that it barely seemed like the same piece of furniture. Tell me, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he told her. His name was Ethan Cruz. He was 31 years old. He was like an old bloodline, pure, one of perhaps 24 remaining in the known shifter world. His family had held a territory in the northern ridge for 3 generations. His maid Lily's mother had been human, had died in childbirth 3 years ago. Complications that a wolf blood body should have been able to survive, and which a Lycan body would have overcome easily. But Lily's mother had been human and fully mortal, and she had not survived. He had left the northern ridge 8 months after that. There were people, old enemies of his bloodline, people who had waited for him to be alone and distracted and diminished by grief, who had decided that 3 years was long enough and had come for the territory. He could have fought them. He could have won. He was Lycan and they were not. But Lily had been in the house during the first attack. Lily had seen things a 2-year-old should not see, and he had decided that the territory was stone and dirt and his daughter was alive, and he had chosen accordingly. He had been moving since then, protecting her, waiting. Waiting for what? Isabella asked. He looked at his hands. I didn't know. Until now. The silence stretched. The candles burned. Outside, Ironmore settled into its night sounds. The people who want your territory, Isabella said carefully. They'll follow you here. Yes, he looked up, his dark eyes direct. I told you it came with complications. I wasn't understating. No, she leaned back in her chair. The wine sat untouched. But you should know something about me, Ethan. What? I have never, not once, in 12 years of leading this pack, abandoned a problem because it got difficult. She held his gaze. You are not a burden. Your daughter is not a burden. Whatever is coming, she stopped. Started again. You held this pack's territory today with your bare hands. Whatever is coming, you won't face it alone. He was very still. You should be careful, he said quietly, about saying things like that to someone who's been alone for 3 years. I know, she said. She poured the wine, both glasses. They talked until the candles burned low, about what it meant to be Lycan and what it had cost, not the physical difference, but the social one, the constant awareness of existing outside every established order, about Lily's mother, whose name had been Wren, who had loved early mornings and terrible jokes and had made Ethan laugh in a way he described, with the careful restraint of someone protecting a private treasure. At some point, the conversation had shifted from the desk to the window seat, both of them looking out at the compound in the dark, and neither of them had commented on the shift. I want to be clear about something, Isabella said. All right. The bond is formal and legal. It protects both of us. She kept her eyes on the dark compound below. But I won't hold you to it beyond what you choose. If when the threat passes and Lily is safe and you want to take her somewhere more permanent, somewhere that's truly yours. Isabella, she stopped. I didn't enter a tournament I could win by accident, he said quietly. She looked at him. I heard about the tournament 3 weeks ago, he said. I had time to think about what it meant, what I was choosing. His dark eyes on her face, steady. I don't do things I haven't decided to do. She looked at him for a long, long moment. Neither do I, she said finally. Outside, the compound slept. Inside, the candles burned down to stubs. The attack came 12 days later. Not during the day. Vincent was not subtle, but he was not stupid. He waited for the second storm of the month, when the cloud cover killed the moonlight and the thunder covered movement. He came with 40 warriors, approached from the east where the wall was oldest and thinnest, and he moved fast. Isabella's perimeter scouts caught the forward element at 3 in the morning. The alarm was a deep horn blast, 3 short, 1 long that pulled Isabella from a dead sleep with the particular lurch of someone whose body had been waiting for this. She was dressed and armed in 90 seconds. The corridor outside her rooms was already filling with pack warriors moving to position. Callum met her at the top of the east stairwell. His jaw was set. 40 plus, maybe 50, he said. East wall. They cut the outer sensor line before the scouts reacted. Ethan already knows. He came out of the guest wing 2 minutes before the alarm. He's with Lily now. She turned for the east wall command post. Callum caught her arm. Isabella. She looked at him. Vincent is here for you personally, Callum said. This isn't a territorial raid. This is he wants the bond nullified and he wants you handled. My read is he has a kill order for Ethan and an extraction for you. Secure the inner compound. Get the non-combatants to the south shelter. She looked at him hard. Keep Lily in the shelter, no matter what. Callum held her gaze a half second. And Ethan? She was already moving. That's his decision to make. She found Ethan in the courtyard. He had Lily in his arms, the little girl awake and solemn and not crying. Her rabbit clutched to her chest, watching everything with those old beyond her years eyes. Sora was there. Isabella's instruction had been clear. Lily went to the south shelter. Ethan looked at Isabella over Lily's head. In the torchlight his face was she didn't have a word for it. Not calm, not afraid, something older than both. She'll be safe, Isabella said. She looked at Lily directly. I promise. Lily looked at her. You keep promises? Lily asked. She'd apparently been burned before. Always, Isabella said. Lily studied her for 3 full seconds. Then she looked at her father and said, in a small but firm voice, go help her, Papa. Ethan pressed his face against her hair for exactly 1 second, set her down, handed the rabbit to her, stood up. Go, he said to Sora. Sora moved. Lily went with her, not looking back because 6-year-olds who have been on the run with their fathers learn early that looking back doesn't help. Ethan turned to Isabella. The courtyard was filling with warriors moving to position. East wall, he asked. East wall, she said. They moved. The east wall was already compromised when they arrived. Vincent's warriors had brought siege tools not elaborate, but sufficient. A section of the old stone had been breached, and they were funneling through in organized units, meeting Ironmore's defenders in the tight space of the outer corridor. Isabella had fought before. She was Alpha. She was trained, experienced, genuinely capable. She was not the strongest warrior in her pack, but she was fast and strategic, and she knew every stone of this compound better than any attacker. She held the right flank of the breach corridor for 11 minutes. Then Vincent arrived personally. He came through the breach with 4 of his best fighters flanking him, and he moved through the outer defenders like they were obstacles rather than people. And he looked across the corridor with that cold, certain smile and said, "You should have taken the offer, Isabella." She fought him. She should have run. She knew, strategically, she should have withdrawn to rally a defensive line further into the compound. But something in her would not yield this corridor, this ground, this home to this man who had decided her entire life was a resource he was owed. She fought him well. For nearly 3 minutes she fought him well. And then his size and his experience, and the 4-warrior suppression, pressing her from the sides, stripped her back against the wall, and Vincent's hand locked around her forearm, and she felt the cold, certain smile in the room rather than seeing it. "It's over," he said. The sound came first, not a roar, not a war cry, something lower, older, a vibration in the air that didn't quite fit human vocal anatomy, that reached into the base of the brainstem and touched something instinctual and ancient. Every crane warrior in the corridor stopped moving. They couldn't help it. Ethan walked through the breach, not ran, walked, with that same quality of absolute calm that had silenced the grandstands at the tournament but amplified now, or rather, no longer restrained. The thing he kept in careful check in ordinary circumstances was simply present now, without apology, filling the space. He looked at the corridor. He looked at Isabella pinned against the wall. He looked at Vincent. "Let go of her," he said. Vincent's hand tightened on Isabella's forearm. His chin came up, dominance reflex. "You have no standing here, rogue. The bond declaration is contested under." "I wasn't asking about legal standing," Ethan said quietly. He moved. What happened in the next 45 seconds was something that every person in that corridor would spend years failing to adequately describe. It was not that Ethan was fast, though he was faster than perception could track at several points. It was not that the Crane Pack warriors were weak. Several were genuinely formidable fighters who had won ranked bouts. It was that Ethan moved through that corridor the way a force of nature moved through a landscape, not aggressive, not emotional, not performing anything at all. And when it was over, 4 warriors were on the ground in configurations that looked painful and permanent, and Vincent Crane was flat against the wall with Ethan's forearm across his chest and one hand at the side of his throat. Ethan had a cut above his left eye from somewhere in the middle of it. He hadn't noticed. He looked at Vincent. "Leave," he said. Vincent's face was doing something complicated, all the dominance and certainty draining away, and something much older and more fundamental replacing it. Prey recognition, the thing that lived in the back of every wolf's brain that knew correctly when it had encountered something it could not overcome. "Leave," Ethan said again. "Take your people. Don't come back." Vincent left. He took his people. He didn't come back. Isabella stood where Vincent had left her and let herself breathe. The compound was still making battle sounds, distant shouts, the clatter of retreat, Callum's voice somewhere doing what Callum's voice always did in a crisis, which was make order out of noise. The breach was already being reinforced by the sounds of it. Ethan turned from the wall and looked at her. "You're hurt," he said. "I'm fine." "Your forearm." She looked down. The bruising from Vincent's grip was already showing, dark against her skin. It would fade in hours. Wolf healing. It didn't matter. "Come here," Ethan said. Not the way people usually said things to their alpha, not deferentially, not cautiously, just the way he said everything, direct, decided. She crossed the corridor. He took her forearm in both hands, very gently, and assessed the bruising with the specific care of someone who had spent years practicing practical medicine, because of course he had, because he had a daughter and no pack and no healer, and he had learned to be sufficient. His hands were warm. His attention was complete. "Nothing structural," he said quietly. "You'll have bruises for a day. I told you I was fine." "You were." He looked up, his dark eyes very close. The cut above his eye was bleeding in a thin line. "You fought well. Too long against too many, but well. I didn't want to retreat." "I know." She was going to say something rational and strategic about the compound, perimeter, and the reinforcement timeline. Instead, she said, "You came very fast." "I heard," he said. "The corridor. Your voice." He paused. "I wasn't going to wait." She looked at him, the torchlight between them, the blood on his forehead, the warmth of his hands still around her arm. "You're bleeding," she said. "I know." Neither of them moved. Sora brought Lily back to the inner courtyard as soon as the compound all clear sounded. Lily found her father by the same internal compass she always used. She crossed the courtyard at a run, which was as much running as Lily ever did, solemn-natured as she was. And he crouched down and caught her with both arms and pressed his face into her hair. And he held on for a long time, and it wasn't subtle or composed. It was the only moment all night that Isabella watched Ethan be completely without armor. Lily pulled back after a while and looked at his face with forensic attention. "You got hurt," she said, pointing at the cut. "A little. I told Sora they should let me come." She was very serious. "I know how to do field bandages." "I know you do." He touched the end of one of her braids. "I'm glad you stayed safe." Lily seemed to accept this. Then she looked over his shoulder at Isabella, who was standing a careful distance away, giving them space. "Is it over?" Lily asked. Isabella crossed the courtyard and crouched down to Lily's level for the second time in the same week. "For tonight," she said. "And I think for a very long time after tonight." Lily studied her. Then she held out the rabbit. "You can hold her again," Lily said. She was scared in the shelter. "She needs someone steady." Isabella took the rabbit. Her throat did something complicated. "Thank you, Lily," she said. "That's okay," Lily said seriously. "You're packed now." Dawn came pink and gold over Ironmore, indifferent to the nights. Events the way dawns always were, arriving with exactly as much warmth as they had always carried, asking no questions. The compound was battered but standing. 2 of Isabella's warriors had significant injuries. None had died. The east wall breach would take 3 days to repair. Vincent's people had carried their wounded and left without their dead, which meant Vincent was more damaged than he'd shown. In the political way, Isabella stood on the east wall parapet in the early light, a mug of something warm in her hand, watching the tree line. She heard him before she saw him, not footsteps, but the particular quality of air that changed when he was nearby. She was starting to recognize it. "Lily's asleep," he said, coming to stand beside her. Finally, she negotiated 3 stories and a full inventory of today's events, the faintest shadow of a smile. "She has thoughts about your defensive wall structure. She's 6. She's very thorough." Isabella looked at the trees. The pink light was turning gold. The morning birds had started. "What happens next?" she asked. "The people who want my territory, they'll hear about what happened last night. It'll change their calculation." He paused, not indefinitely, but significantly. "How long do we have?" "Months, maybe longer." He was quiet for a moment. "Long enough." She looked at him. He was looking at the light. In the morning gold, the cut above his eye was already closing Lycan healing. Another category entirely from her own. Long enough for what? She asked. He looked at her, and she thought she finally understood what she had seen in his eyes since the first night on the wall. Not the controlled calm of someone who felt nothing, but the controlled calm of someone who felt everything and had learned, in the hardest possible way, to hold it carefully. For whatever this is, he said, to become what I think it's going to be. She held his gaze, the morning light between them, the mugwort in her hands. That's a very careful way of saying something, she said. I'm a careful person. No, she said, thinking of the tournament, of the corridor, of the way he'd said I wasn't going to wait. You're not. You're decisive. That's different. He looked at her for a long moment. You're right, he said. I am. The morning birds were very loud. She looked at the trees. We should talk to Marin about the wall reinforcement timeline, she said. Yes. And the legal documentation for the bond. Yes. And Lily's going to want to inspect the breach site. We should probably let her, or she'll do it anyway. She will, he agreed. The gold light deepened. Neither of them moved. The messenger arrived at midday. Young, unfamiliar, wearing no pack colors. He asked for Ethan by name, not by title, not by description, by name. Ethan read the folded letter without expression. Then he folded it again and stood very still. Isabella watched him. Ethan. He looked up. Whatever it says, she said quietly. You don't face it alone, remember? He looked at her for a long moment. Then he held out the letter. She read it. Her blood went cold. It wasn't from a pack. It wasn't from a territorial rival. It was from an authority far older and more powerful than Vincent Crane had ever dreamed of being. 3 lines, formally worded, carrying a seal she recognized from history texts. The Lycan Council has been made aware of your location. You have 7 days to appear before the High Assembly or be considered in violation of the desertion accord. Failure to comply will result in forced retrieval. The child is to be surrendered to council custody pending resolution. Isabella read it twice. Then she looked up at Ethan. The Lycan Council, she said. Yes, they want Lily. They believe he started again. His voice very carefully controlled. They believe a Lycan child should be raised within council governance, under supervision. They've believed this since she was born. It's why I left. Isabella looked at the letter, then at him. How powerful is the Lycan Council? More powerful than Crane was. He held her gaze. More powerful than most things you've encountered. She handed the letter back. She straightened her spine. 7 days, she said. 7 days. She nodded slowly. Then we have 7 days to make sure that when they arrive, they face something they weren't expecting. He watched her. We, he said. We, she said. And the word was as decided as anything he had ever said. Something in his face and the careful, controlled surface finally, completely broke open. They started planning the same afternoon the letter arrived. Isabella spread every territorial map she owned across the war room table, not just Ironmore, but the regional network, the alliance lines, the legal codices going back to 100 years. Elder Marin arrived within the hour, took one look at the letter, and sat down without being asked. Callum came in from the east wall reinforcement and read it over Marin's shoulder and said nothing for a full minute. Can she contest jurisdiction? Callum asked. That's what we're going to find out, Isabella said. Ethan sat at the far end of the table, his elbows on the maps, his hands folded. He had not said much since the letter arrived. He was doing the thing he did, the deep stillness that was not absence but rather the opposite of it. A man processing at a level below what words could reach. Lily was in the adjoining room with Sora, drawing. She didn't know about the letter. She was 6. The world had already handed her enough truth early. This one could wait until it had to be spoken. The desertion accord, Marin said, tracing the letter's language with one finger. I know this. Not well, but I know of it. It's a Lycan governance instrument, very old, pre-modern pack law. Can pack law override it? Isabella asked. Pack law and Lycan law exist in parallel jurisdictions. Marin looked up. The question is whether the bond changes the calculus. Everyone looked at Ethan. He lifted his head. The bond makes Isabella a secondary party to any council action involving me, he said. Technically under old Lycan law, a bonded mate of Lycan standing has standing to petition the High Assembly directly. Silence. You knew that, Isabella said. Not accusatory. Just reading him. I knew it was a possibility, he said carefully. I didn't know if you'd want to use it. She looked at him across the maps. That's what I'm here for, she said. Use it. That evening, Ethan put Lily to bed in the room that had quietly become hers. She had arranged her 3 possessions on the windowsill with the precise, spatial logic of a child who had learned to make any place feel like home quickly. The rabbit, a smooth gray stone she'd found in the courtyard, and a small drawing she'd made of the Ironmore compound that she'd given to Sora and then asked back because she wanted to look at it at night. He sat on the edge of her bed after the story, a long, rambling tale about a wolf who went on a journey and found a forest full of unexpected friends that had evolved over months of improvisation and now had more characters than most novels. Papa, Lily said, are we staying here? He was quiet for a moment. I hope so. She accepted this. Then, I like it here. Sora taught me how to do a proper wrap bandage. And Isabella lets me walk on the west wall if I hold someone's hand. A pause. She holds my hand herself sometimes. He looked at his daughter. She does, he said. She acts like it's just practical, Lily said, with the calm perceptiveness of a child who had been paying careful attention to adults her entire life, but she holds on tight. He was quiet for a moment. Get some sleep, he said. Papa, do you like her? Lily, you look at her the same way you used to look at Mama's drawings, she said simply, and closed her eyes with the absolute finality of a 6-year-old who had said what she needed to say. He sat in the dark for a long time after she fell asleep, his hand on the edge of her blanket. Outside, the compound moved through its night sounds. He had spent 3 years telling himself that whatever was left of him after Ren was sufficient to raise Lily, to keep her safe, to keep moving. He had not told himself it was enough for anything else. He had been careful about the distinction. He was starting to understand that careful distinctions had limits. Isabella found the drawing on her desk. She hadn't put it there. It was a piece of folded paper, slightly crumpled at the corners, and when she opened it, she found a child's crayon drawing. A large building that was recognizably Ironmore's main hall, rendered in the bold, uncorrected lines of a 6-year-old who drew what she meant rather than what she saw. In front of the building, 3 figures. A tall one with a dot of dark hair, a short one with a yellow dress, and between them slightly taller, with a scribble of orange-red hair and a careful green dot for each eye. At the bottom, in the large uneven print of a child learning to write, Us. Isabella sat at her desk for a very long time. She was an alpha. She had governed since she was 19. She had buried pack members, negotiated territorial disputes, faced down rivals twice her age, held her people together through drought and sickness and political siege. She had not cried in front of another person in 11 years. She did not cry now, but she folded the drawing very carefully and put it in the inside pocket of her coat, close to her chest, and she sat there, in the quiet of the late night, and felt something she didn't entirely have language for, something that was grief and gratitude and the particular ache of understanding that you had been lonely for years without admitting it. She had been doing fine. She had always been doing fine. She had also been alone in this room every night for 12 years. By day 3, Isabella had sent writers and messages to 11 allied packs. By day 4, 7 had responded with formal declarations of solidarity, not military pledges, but legal witness statements attesting to the legitimacy of the bond declaration. Under regional pack law, 2 had offered physical presence. 1 Alpha Akira of the coastal ridge, a woman, Isabella had known since childhood arrived in person on the morning of day 4, riding in with 4 of her senior warriors and a caseload of legal precedent documents she'd been pulling together since the first message arrived. Akira was 40, lean and angular, with close-cropped silver blonde hair and the particular energy of someone who processed everything as a problem to be solved and was never happier than when the problem was complicated. She embraced Isabella in the courtyard with real warmth and then immediately asked to see the letter. She read it twice. The desertion accord, she said, was last successfully invoked 46 years ago. It was contested and partially overturned on appeal, but the appeal took 3 years and cost the contesting party enormously. She looked at Isabella. The council is banking on you not having the resources or the knowledge to contest it. They were wrong about the knowledge, Isabella said. We're working on the resources. The bond is your strongest argument. Akira handed the letter back. A Lycan who has formally bonded with a sitting Alpha the council has standing to summon, but arresting him requires overcoming territorial law on your ground. And if you file a counter petition under the Regional Shifter Compact. She paused. Has he accepted formal pack membership? Isabella looked at her. That, Akira said, is your answer. Pack membership makes him Ironmore. Ironmore is your territory. Council jurisdiction becomes secondary to regional law. It doesn't eliminate the summons, but it changes the battleground entirely. Isabella thought about Ethan on the wall in the dark. I didn't enter a tournament I could win by accident. I need to talk to him, she said. She found him in the east courtyard, rebuilding a section of the breach wall with 2 of her pack stone workers, not directing, doing it. His shirt sleeves rolled up, mortar on his forearms, placing stones with the same careful precision he brought to everything. She stopped and watched him for a moment before he noticed her. He had been like this the whole 7 days present, useful, folding himself into the life of the compound with no drama and no performance of fitting in, simply fitting in. The stone workers had accepted him on the 2nd day, the way people accepted someone who did real work without making it about themselves. Lily had already become a fixture in the healer's wing because Sora was there and Sora was teaching her things. The pack was beginning to move around them both the way water finds new channels. He noticed her, set down the stone, pulled a cloth from his pocket and began wiping the mortar from his hands. Alpha Akira had a suggestion, she said. I heard she arrived. Pack membership, she held his gaze. Formal, official. If you become a member of Ironmore Pack, territorial law takes precedence over council jurisdiction on this ground. It doesn't eliminate the summons, but it changes the legal terrain significantly. He was quiet, wiping the mortar from his hand slowly. You'd be asking your pack to take on a Lycan council action, he said. I'd be asking my pack to protect one of its own, she said. That's different. He looked at her. The morning light was direct and honest. If I accept membership, he said carefully, it means I'm not just here until the threat passes. It means this is home. Lily's home. It means I'm yours. The word landed in the space between them with more weight than either of them was quite prepared for. Isabella held his gaze. I know what it means, she said. He was still for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, then yes. Pack membership ceremonies varied by tradition. Ironmore's was old, stripped down over generations to its essential form, which took perhaps 20 minutes and required only the Alpha, the joining member, Elder Marin as witness, and spoken oath. They did it in the Great Hall at dusk on day 5. Isabella had not told the full pack about the council summons. She would, but she needed the legal groundwork laid first. She had told them a formal membership ceremony was taking place and that attendance was optional. The hall was full within 10 minutes of the announcement going out. Packs understood things without being told. They had watched Ethan for 2 weeks. They had watched Isabella. They had watched Lily sit solemnly in the healer's wing learning bandage technique and treat every member of the compound who visited with the grave courtesy of a diplomat who happened to be 6. They knew what was happening. The ceremony was simple. Ethan stood before Isabella in the center of the great hall. He looked at her, and she looked at him. An elder Marin recited the oath in the old language, words that were older than the compound, older than any of them, words that had been spoken over bonds of war and love and loyalty for generations. Ethan repeated them without hesitation, every word, his voice steady and low, filling the hall. Isabella placed both hands flat against his chest. Old gesture, old law, the Alpha's formal acceptance, and felt his heartbeat under her palms, even and unhurried, and thought, this is what decided feels like. The hall went very quiet. Then Lily, seated in the front row with Sora, lifted the cloth rabbit above her head with both hands. That means yes, she informed the hall gravely. The hall erupted. The feast afterward was not planned. It simply happened the way things happened in packs. Organically, someone bringing bread and someone else bringing the good barrels from the back cellar, and suddenly there was music and the great hall was doing what great halls were built for. Lily fell asleep in Ethan's arms around the second hour, still clutching the rabbit, utterly unbothered by the noise, the way only children who feel completely safe can sleep in chaos. He carried her out to put her to bed, and when he came back, Isabella was at the end of the hall where the archway opened onto the rear garden, leaning against the stone in the night air, mug in hand, the hall noise warm behind her. He came and stood beside her. Not 3 feet away this time, 1 foot. How do you feel? She asked. He thought about it honestly. Like something I've been holding for a very long time just put itself down. She looked at him. I know that feeling, she said quietly. I know you do. He looked at her profile in the garden light. Lily told me you hold her hand when you walk the wall. It's a safety precaution. She said you hold on tight. Isabella looked at the garden. She's very observant for 6. She gets it from her mother, a pause the gentle kind, not the painful kind. And apparently from watching me watch you for 2 weeks. She was quiet. The night air was cool. The music from inside was warm. I don't know how to do this slowly, she said. I've spent 12 years making decisions fast and implementing them and not second guessing. I don't know how to, she stopped. I don't know how to not be an alpha for 5 minutes and just be a person. You don't have to stop being an alpha, he said. I'm not asking you to be less than what you are. He looked at her directly. I want all of it. The pack, the wall at midnight, the impossible problems, the drawing Lily made that I know you put in your coat pocket. She looked at him. How do you know about that? Because I know where Lily put it, the shadow of a smile. And because I know you, she held his gaze. The garden around them, the music behind them, the cold air and the warm light. This is still a very complicated situation, she said. Yes, the council arrives tomorrow. Yes, you understand that tomorrow may be. Isabella, he said her name the way he said everything directly, fully, without hedging. I know what tomorrow is. I'm not going into it thinking about the odds. He looked at her. I'm going into it thinking about what I'm fighting for. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. Not strategic, not ceremonial, not alpha to pack member. Just her hand finding his in the dark. He held on, tight the way Lily had said. They came at dawn. 5 of them council adjudicators, formally titled, in deep gray travel coats bearing the Lycan council seal. A silver circle containing 3 overlapping wolf forms, ancient and austere. They arrived on horseback at the main gate with a 6th figure behind them. A man Isabella didn't recognize, tall and cold-faced, perhaps 50, silver hair pulled back from a hard, angular face with the bearing of someone accustomed to compliance. His name, Ethan told her quietly when she asked, was Counselor Eldrick, senior adjudicator, the one who had drafted the desertion accord summons personally. How well do you know him? Isabella asked. Well enough, Ethan said. He was the one who told me, when Lily was born, that a half-human Lycan child could not be raised in an unstructured environment. He said she was a resource, Isabella's jaw tightened. She walked to the gate. She was in her full formal attire. The dark ceremonial coat with silver wolf crest stitching, silver buckled boots, auburn hair in the formal half arrangement from the night before. Callum was at her right. Alpha Akira was at her left. Behind them, Iramore's warriors not in combat formation, but present, visible, a quiet statement of numbers and solidarity. Counselor Aldrich looked at the assembly with the calm appraisal of a man performing a routine, administrative function. Alpha Voss, he said, we are here on council business. We require the Lycan designated Ethan Voss, formerly of the Northern Ridge Territory, and his minor child, to accompany us for. You require nothing on this ground, Isabella said. Her voice carried. Aldrich paused. One eyebrow rose. This pack is a recognized regional authority, she said. Under the Regional Shifter Compact, Article 9, all council actions on affiliated territory require the consent of the presiding alpha or documented evidence of criminal jurisdiction. You have neither. She looked at him steadily. Ethan Voss is a formal member of Ironmore Pack as of yesterday evening, witnessed by 11 allied alphas. The bond declaration is filed and countersigned under regional law. Whatever jurisdiction the council believes it holds, it does not hold it here. Silence. Aldrich looked past her, at Ethan, standing 3 feet behind her right shoulder. This isn't over, Aldrich said quietly. No, Isabella agreed, but today it is. She held his gaze. You're welcome to lodge a formal counter petition with the regional assembly. I'll respond to every point. She looked at the 5 adjudicators. Safe travels. She turned and walked back toward the compound. She did not look back. Alphys did not look back. Beside her, she heard Ethan exhale very quietly, very controlled, the single breath of a man who had been ready to fight and was processing the fact that the fight had been won differently. Once the gate closed behind the last council horse, the compound held its collective breath for seconds. Then Callum made a sound that was mostly exhale and partly laugh. Akira pressed 2 fingers to her temple, in the gesture of someone filing a victory away for later celebration. Marin, from somewhere behind the warrior line, said, about time, in a tone that suggested she'd been waiting for this outcome since the letter arrived. Isabella stood with her back to the gate, facing her pack. She looked at them, warriors who had reinforced a breach wall at 3 in the morning, stone workers who had worked alongside a stranger without question, a teenage healer's apprentice who had spent a week keeping a 6-year-old safe and educated and on board, a pack that had taken to strangers in and made them theirs in the way packs did when they were healthy and whole. She had built this over 12 years. Well done, she said simply. And then Ethan was beside her. And then Lily was somehow in his arms. She'd appeared from the direction of the inner courtyard, clearly having escaped whatever supervision had been arranged, still in her nightclothes, and she was looking over her father's shoulder at Isabella with those solemn dark eyes. Did we win? Lily asked. Today, Isabella said. Yes. What about the other days? We'll win those too, Ethan said. He was looking at Isabella when he said it. 3 days after the council left, a formal counter notice arrived from the regional shifter assembly, an acknowledgement of Isabella's petition and a provisional ruling that the council's summons was suspended, pending a formal hearing, to be scheduled within 90 days. 90 days, real time in a real place, which was more than they'd had 2 weeks ago. Ethan read the notice at the war room table, Isabella across from him, and set it down. 90 days, he said. More likely, Marin said from the doorway. The assembly schedule's slow, and our case is strong. She looked at both of them. I've seen worse positions resolved permanently in less time. When Marin left, they said in the war room quiet. It's not over, Ethan said. No, Isabella agreed. There'll be another letter, another action. Yes, he looked at the notice on the table. And you're prepared for that. For all of it, indefinitely. I told you, she said. I don't abandon problems because they get difficult. He looked at her. The morning light through the war room's narrow window was hitting the side of her face, and she was looking at the notice with her alpha expression. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yes, the drawing Lily made, the one that set us." He held her gaze. "Do you still have it?" She reached into the inside pocket of her coat without breaking eye contact and placed it on the table between them. He looked at it. 3 crayon figures. A building. "Lily sees things clearly," he said quietly. "She does," Isabella said. He looked up. "So do I," he said. Lily had decided that the healer's wing was hers, not aggressively. She had simply begun, arriving every morning with her rabbit under one arm and a look of professional readiness, and Sora had found that the most effective approach was to give her a small, designated workspace and genuine tasks, which Lily performed with a 6-year-old's meticulous attention to detail and complete seriousness of purpose. She had also, quietly and without announcement, begun calling Isabella by name. Not Alpha Voss, not the Alpha, not even a title. Just Isabella, said in the particular way children said names they decided belonged to them, with simple ownership. The first time it happened, Isabella had been passing the healer's wing and Lily had looked up from her bandage project and said, "Isabella, Sora says I can learn about splints next week," with such total casual certainty that Isabella had stopped walking and stood in the doorway for a moment absorbing it. "That's good," she'd said finally. "Do you know about splints?" Lily had asked. "A little. You could help," Lily had said, and returned to her bandages with the air of having extended and completed a reasonable offer. Isabella had told Ethan about it later, without quite meaning to, and he had looked at her with that open, aching look he got sometimes and said, "She's been waiting for someone to be Isabella to since she was 3 years old," and Isabella had understood completely what he meant. The assembly hearing was held 41 days later at the neutral grounds, a large stone hall in the middle of the valley between 3 territories, built specifically for disputes that required neutral arbitration. Isabella had been here twice before. Both times she had won. She intended to make it 3. The hall seated to 100. It was full, not just with legal parties with witnesses, allied alphas, and a quantity of press representatives from the regional shifter networks that suggested word had traveled further than Ironmore's territory. A Lycan challenging council jurisdiction with a regional pact's full legal backing was not a story that stayed local. Ethan sat at the petitioner's table beside Isabella. He wore a dark formal jacket she hadn't seen before. Callum had apparently organized it without being asked. The beta's particular form of quiet competence. He sat with his hands folded and his face still, the way he always sat, and Isabella thought, most people in this room are going to misread that stillness as submission. They were wrong. Rhea sat behind them with the 11 allied solidarity statements. Marin sat behind Rhea with 200 years of legal precedent. Councillor Eldrick sat at the opposing table. He had brought 3 legal representatives and a written statement from the High Assembly that was 14 pages long. The arbitrator, a rangy, gray-haired woman named Justine, who had held the neutral grounds for 30 years and was known for suffering no performance from either side, looked at both tables. "We're here on the matter of council jurisdiction versus regional pact sovereignty," she said. "Both parties have submitted documentation. I have questions." She looked at Eldrick. "Let's start with you." The hearing ran for 6 hours. Eldrick was formidable. He was precise, well prepared, and had clearly expected this to be settled by the weight of council authority alone, but when that authority was challenged by a coherent legal case rather than simple resistance, he had the resources to adapt. He argued the desertion accord clearly. He argued Lycan Council jurisdiction as pre-existing and superior to regional compact law. He argued, carefully and without apparent emotion, that a half-Lycan child raised without council supervision represented a risk not to Lily specifically but to the stability of Lycan bloodline records. Isabella watched him make the argument and felt a cold clarity settle into her. When it was her turn, she stood. She did not use notes. Counselor Aldrich has argued jurisdiction, she said, but jurisdiction exists to serve people, not the reverse. The council's stated concern is Lily's welfare and the stability of Lycan bloodline records. She looked at Aldrich directly. I would like to know when a child last appeared before this assembly able to speak on her own welfare. Aldrich said nothing. The Regional Compact, Article 12, guarantees that any party, subject to a jurisdictional action who is old enough to communicate a preference, has the right to have that preference recorded before the arbitrator. She looked at Justine. Lily Voss is 6 years old. She communicates clearly. I am requesting that her statement be entered into the record. Aldrich stood. The child is a minor and cannot. The compact does not set a minimum age, Isabella said. It says communicates clearly. I'll let the arbitrator judge. Justine looked at Aldrich, then at Isabella. Bring the child, she said. They brought Lily in through the side door. She was wearing the yellow dress. She had her rabbit. She had clearly been informed in advance, because she walked to the small chair positioned before the arbitrator's bench with the composure of someone who had been expecting this and had prepared accordingly. She sat down. She looked at Justine with her serious dark eyes. Hello, she said. Hello, Justine said. Her voice had lost some of its courtroom edge. Do you know why you're here? Yes, Lily said. Some people want me to go away with them instead of staying with Papa and Isabella. I don't want to. Can you tell me why? Lily thought about it. With the particular gravity of a child who understood the question was real and wanted to answer it honestly. Papa keeps me safe, she said. He always has. He stays awake watching the door and he teaches me things. And when I have bad dreams, he's always there. She held the rabbit a little tighter. And Isabella, she paused. Isabella holds on tight. When she says she'll keep a promise, she does. Another pause. She keeps me safe in the different way. The way where I don't have to be scared about the big things. The hall was absolutely silent. The council people don't know me, Lily continued, with gentle practicality. They didn't ask what I wanted. They just sent a letter. She looked at Aldrich directly, without fear, with the devastating candor of a child who had learned to read adults accurately. That's not how you take care of someone. Justine looked at Lily for a long moment. Then she wrote something down. Across the hall, Ethan's hands, folded on the table, were perfectly still, but his jaw had a tightness that Isabella recognized the specific tension of a man who was feeling something very large and very deep and holding it together through sheer discipline. She slid her hand under the table and covered his. He turned his palm upward and held on. Justine's ruling came 2 hours later. It was not the complete permanent resolution Isabella had hoped for. The law was what it was, and full council jurisdiction required a second hearing at the high assembly level, which would come. But the provisional ruling was clear. Pending the full hearing, Ethan Voss remained under Ironmore Pact jurisdiction. No extraction or removal of the child would be permitted without a unanimous assembly vote, and the council's use of the desertion accord was suspended for review pending documentation that the accord had been lawfully renewed within the last 50 years. It had not been. Akira's research had found the gap 3 days earlier. Aldrich's expression, when Justine read that last point, was the first genuinely human thing Isabella had seen on his face all day. Surprise followed immediately by the calculation of someone who knew they'd lost a battle and was already planning the war. Isabella made a note of the expression and filed it, but the ruling was what it was. Ethan and Lily were going home. The road from the neutral grounds to Ironmore was 4 hours. They rode in a group: Isabella, Ethan, Callum, Rhea and her warriors, Marin in the supply cart because she refused to ride horses at her age, and Lily, who who was sharing a horse with Ethan and had fallen asleep against his arm within the first hour. They rode mostly in comfortable silence, the kind that comes after something difficult and costly has been survived, and the body hasn't yet caught up to the fact that it can relax. About 2 hours in, Rhea pulled her horse alongside Isabella's. "You know today wasn't the end," Rhea said quietly. "I know. The council will regroup. Eldrick will come back with better documentation." "I know." Isabella looked at the road ahead. "And we'll be better prepared than we were today." Akira was quiet for a moment. "I've known you for 30 years, Isabella. Since before either of us was Alpha." She glanced back at Ethan, riding close behind with his sleeping daughter. "I've never seen you the way you are right now." "How am I? Not alone." Akira said it simply. "You've never been not alone before. Not like this." Isabella looked at the road. The late afternoon light was gold through the trees. "No," she said. "I haven't. It looks good on you," Akira said, and rode ahead before Isabella could respond to that. They arrived at Ironmore as the sun was going down. The compound was lit warm amber from the torches and the hall windows. The smell of wood smoke and the evening meal. The sound of the pack in its night-settling rhythms. The gate opened before they reached it. Lily woke up at the sound of the gate and lifted her head and looked at the lit compound, and said, in a small, sleepy voice, "We're home." Neither Ethan nor Isabella said anything, but something in the way they looked at each other over Lily's head, across the 4 feet between their horses in the dusk, was the whole story. Callum took the horses. Akira's warriors dispersed toward the guest wing. Marin descended from the supply cart with the careful dignity of a 70-year-old who was not going to be helped and would not. "Thank you for trying." And then it was just the 3 of them in the courtyard. In the dusk, in the warm light of the compound, Lily climbed down from the horse with careful 6-year-old concentration, landed safely, and looked up at both of them. "I'm hungry," she announced. "Dinner's ready," Isabella said. "Can I sit between you?" Ethan looked at Isabella. Isabella looked at Ethan. "Yes," they said, simultaneously, and then looked at each other, and something broke open in both their faces, not grand, not performed, just to people surprised by themselves, by the word that had come out of both of them at once, by the simplicity of it. Lily, satisfied, walked toward the hall with her rabbit. They followed. A month after the hearing, life at Ironmore had arranged itself into something that looked, from the outside, like ordinary. Lily had graduated from bandage technique to basic herb identification in the healer's wing, which she pursued with the methodical energy of a child who had found her vocation early. She had also taken to accompanying Isabella on the morning wall walk every 3rd day, holding her hand on the narrow sections, informing her of pack observations with the conscientiousness of a very small and very serious beta. Ethan had taken the east wall reinforcement as a personal project and had finished it in half the projected time, partly because of Lycan physical capability and partly because he seemed to find the physical work genuinely satisfying, in the way people found things satisfying that required their full attention. He had also, quietly and without announcement, begun training 3 of Ironmore's younger warriors in the movement pattern that had won the tournament, the thing Callum had identified as like an origin technique, which it was, though Ethan taught it stripped to its principles rather than its bloodline. Callum had told Isabella, with the precise language of a beta who weighed his words, "He's investing in us." She knew. The council had sent a formal scheduling notice for the High Assembly hearing. 90 days out. They had 90 days to build an even stronger case. They were building it. She was on the east wall at midnight, and he was there too, of course he was. And the moon was 3/4 full and the forest was dark and the compound was sleeping. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. The hearing brief. "Akira sent new precedent cases. I should review them tomorrow. You should sleep tonight. You're on the wall at midnight. I sleep for hours. You know this." She looked at the trees. "The Lycan thing?" "Partly," he was quiet. "Partly I like it up here." She knew why. She had always known why. The wall at midnight was the seam of things where the responsibility of the compound met the wildness of the forest, where you could be alpha and also just a person standing in the dark feeling the wind. Lily asked me something today, he said. What? She asked if you were going to be her mother. The word landed in the still air between them, large and specific and completely unhedged. What did you tell her? Isabella asked. I told her that was a question for you. She looked at him. He was looking at the forest, giving her space for the answer. What do you want me to tell her? She asked. He was quiet for a moment. I want you to tell her whatever is true, he said. I'm not asking you to be something you're not ready to be. I'm not rushing. Ethan. He stopped. She turned to face him fully, the moonlight between them. Her face clear and decided and not performing anything at all. She already is, Isabella said. She has been for a while. I just didn't have the language for it yet. A pause. I think she knew before I did. He looked at her, and the thing that happened in his face was not the careful, controlled, open look she had come to know. It was bigger than that. Something that had been kept in a very small space for a very long time and was slowly understanding that it didn't have to be small anymore. She stepped forward, the last foot between them, her hand on his chest the way it had been at the ceremony, but different now, not formal, not ceremonial, just her. I love her, she said simply. And she stopped, looked at him directly. I love you. That's also been true for a while. I just needed to say it out loud in the dark so it counted. He put both hands over hers, held on the way he always held on tight, decided, with no intention of letting go. It counts, he said. The moon was generous. The forest was dark. The compound slept below them, and the wall at midnight, that thin seam between what was hers to protect and what was wild and possible, held both of them together. The High Assembly hearing was in a hall 3 times the size of the neutral grounds. Eldrick had come with 5 additional legal representatives, 2 council historians, and a revised version of the desertion accord with fresh documentation that Ria's team had spent 6 weeks examining for weaknesses. They had found 3. The hearing ran for 2 days. On the afternoon of the 2nd day, the High Assembly ruled the desertion accord, in its current form, did not supersede the regional shifter compact's provisions for voluntarily bonded pack members of Lycan heritage. The council retained the right to maintain contact with Lycan heritage individuals, including Lily, but not jurisdictional control. Educational and cultural access could be arranged by consent and mutual agreement. By consent, Lily's word, entered in the original hearing record, had carried. Justine had made sure of it. Eldrick accepted the ruling with the precise expression of someone who had lost and knew it, and was filing it for appeal while smiling. He was that kind of man. Isabella had planned for that kind of man. She walked out of the assembly hall into the late afternoon light and stood there for a moment. Ethan came out behind her. He stood beside her. Is it done? He asked. This round, she said. He'll appeal. It'll take years. We'll fight it every time. Yes, he said. We will. She looked at him. He looked back. No armor, no careful control. Just Ethan, sharp-boned and warm and decided, in the afternoon light of a victory that was real and hard-won and theirs. Where's Lily? She asked, with Callum and Sora in the transit hall. Callum bought her something from a vendor. She's probably negotiating a trade for the rabbit. She'd never trade the rabbit. No, but she'll negotiate as a matter of principle. Isabella laughed. Actually laughed out loud, unguarded, the real kind that came from somewhere undefended. She hadn't done that in the open in years. He watched her laugh with the expression she was coming to understand was simply his face, when he was looking at her and not managing it. What? She said. Nothing, he said. He paused. I forgot what this felt like. What? Happy, he said simply. I forgot what it felt like. She took his hand. Me too, she said. When they got back to Ironmore, Lily was asleep in the supply cart before they reached the compound gate, the rabbit tucked under her chin. a small paper parcel from the vendor's stall loose in her hand. Her face the absolute blank piece of a child who felt completely safe. Ethan carried her through the gate. Isabella walked beside him. The compound was lit and warm and making its evening sounds. Marin was on the inner steps with a cup of something, watching them come in with the expression of someone who had seen enough of the world to recognize a good outcome. When it finally showed up, "Well," Marin said. "We won," Isabella said. "Today," Marin said. "Today," Isabella agreed. "And we'll win the next one too." Marin looked at the three of them, Ethan with Lily sleeping against his shoulder, Isabella at his side, the three of them moving through the gate together like something that had always been arranged this way and had simply needed time to find its form. "Yes," the old woman said quietly. "I think you will." The gate closed behind them. The compound settled into its night. Somewhere in the healer's wing, Sora had left a candle on for Lily's return. The east wall stood solid under the stars. An iron more the pack, the walls. The people inside them breathed in and out in the deep rhythm of something safe. For tonight, for all the nights after.
Some chains are broken by force. Some are broken by choice. Ethan chose her pack. Isabella chose his daughter. And Lily, wise beyond her 6 years, had already chosen for all of them. Home isn't walls. It's the people who hold on tight. This is elite divide, where love doesn't care how high you've built your walls, or how wide the gap between your worlds. It jumps.